Hello friends, and in this video we are going to show the ping rate at top corner. So right here in the hierarchy, let's create a new canvas. So go to UI and create a canvas and rename it to ping rate canvas, and in the canvas uh, create a text and rename it to ping rate text. So make sure to on the ping rate canvas set it to scale with screen size, and let's go back to our game manager script. And in the game manager script, first of all, get the public reference of ping rate text and define the update function. And in the update function we are setting the text to networking ping colon and then the our ping rate. So let's save that, and now let's create a health bar for our player. So drag your player into the hierarchy, and on canvas let's create a new UI image and rename it to health bar, and let's resize it. So select the rect tool and let's resize it. Sorry. And now duplicate the health bar and rename it to health bar fill, and make the health bar fill child of health bar, and change the color to maybe red, and create a new sprite and rename it health fill, and let's drag this onto our source image. And now we are going to select the image type to filled, and the fill method is going to be horizontal. So now we can change our health bar. So in the next video we are going to put the functionality of health bar script called health and apply it on our player. So as you can see right here, now open the script in Visual Studio and import using photon.pun and unity engine.ui. So let's create a public reference for the filled image. So public image fill image, and now we are going to create an RPC. So pun RPC, and let's say public void health update, and we are going to take the damage here. So float damage and fill image dot fill amount minus equals. So we are subtracting the damage, and we are going to call this health update from our bullet script actually. So let's open the bullet script. So when our bullet hits any target, then what we are going to do is we are going to check here first of all if the target to which our bullet is hitting dot tag is equal to player, because only player has the health So only then we are going to call the RPC using target photon view. So target dot RPC, and the targets are going to be the RPC target dot all buffered. So the name of the RPC is going to be the health update, and also we have added an argument called damage. So what we are going to do is we are going to pass the damage. So I am going to create a new float variable. So public float bullet damage, and let's assign it to 0.3 f, and we are going to copy the bullet damage and paste it as an argument. Now let's go back to our editor, and on the game manager make sure to assign the ping rate that we defined in the previous video. Ping rate. And on the health we need to assign the fill image. So fill image is going to be this red image. Now let's assign that to it. Now also make sure to tag our player with the player tag and hit apply. Now I have built the game. Right now you can see that I have two instances, PC1 and PC2. So now I am controlling this instance, and if I press control, you can see that we are firing and the health is updated on both sides. Similarly, if I shift to this, now you can see the health is updating. Now now our health is updating fine, but we are not checking if the health is 0, and we need to check for the health and play the dead animation, or make our player die on the basis of health when it reaches to 0. So to do that, I am going to create a public float variable. So public float and health, and set it to 1. Why? Because if you see in our health bar fill, the total amount is 1. So right here, copy the health, and simply health is going to be equal to fill image dot fill amount. Now let's create a check method. So public void check health, and in here we are simply going to check if the health is less than or equal to 0, then it means our player should be dead, and we need to call this check health method each time we update our health. So right here we are going to call the check health. Now the if you see this RPC, in here we are actually changing the fill amount of image on network, and also we are updating our health value on network. So both of these things will be called on all the clients, and all the clients will update their values. Also each and every client will call then check health function, and in the check health function we are checking if the health is less than or equal to 0. And in here we will call the death RPC. So let's first quickly create this. So it is going to be pun RPC and public void death, and in here we will do the necessary stuff for death. But in here we are going to actually say photon view dot. So I am going to inherit from mono behavior pun, and let's say and sorry, it is going to be the health. Now why we are checking for this condition before calling this RPC? This is because let's say we have 4 computers or 4 players. So this is player 1 on PC1, player 2 player 1 on PC2, and player 1 on PC3, and player 1 on PC4. Now here is our death RPC. So let's say the player dies, so the player will then call the death RPC, and this death RPC will be get called at all of the clients. But but if we don't have this condition, then what is going to be happen when player 1 dies? Similarly, this is player is going to call the death RPC, this is also going to call the death RPC, and then when the first player will call the death RPC, it is going to be executed to all of the other clients. Similarly, at the same time, second player is also going to call the death RPC, then this death RPC is going to be called again on each of the client. Similarly, the third one is also going to call the death RPC, and this death RPC is then going to be executed on all other, and same with the fourth. The 4 is also going to call the death RPC, and so on. So to remove this overhead, we are simply checking if the photon view dot is mine, only then we are going to call this death RPC. So I hope you understand. So let's call the death RPC right here. So we are going to get the reference of the photon view by using this dot get component, and the component is photon view dot RPC, and the name of the RPC is going to be death, and RPC targets dot all buffered. So now when we die, we need to enable and disable something. So let's first get the reference of rigid body. So public rigid body 2D, and call it RB. Also we need to disable the sprite renderer. So let's get public sprite renderer, call it SR, and also we need to disable the collider, so public box collider 2D and call it collider. Now in the depth we are simply going to say RB 0 and also the collider dot enabled is going to be false. Now we also have a revive capability, so player can then respawn after some time or get revived. So for that we are going to have another pun RPC, so pun RPC public void and revive, and in here we are going to copy all of these things and set them back. So is going to be 1 and this is going to be true and this is going to be true. Now we are going to call this from game manager. System is hello friends, and now in this video we are going to add the respawning and revive player functionality. So in the last video we added this health script and we added an RPC to revive the player. So let's start with displaying the text. So after the player dies, a UI or text will appear right here and it will say respawn in 5 4 3 and a countdown timer will start. So then the player will be respawned, and for that we are going to create first of all a text, and let's say respawn text, and place it at the top, and let's focus it in the scene view and change the scale maybe, and after changing the scale again align it and put everything in the center, make it bold and the text color to white. So this will actually say respawn in, like that. Now I am also going to make the best fit checkbox to true, and let's create an overlay for that. So I'm going to create an image and make it like that, and let's say respawn UI, and I am going to decrease the alpha and like that, and make the respawn text a child of respawn UI, and let's add an outline to it. So that's it. Now let's go back to our game manager script, and in here first of all we need a reference to the text, so public text and spawn text or maybe spawn timer, and also we are going to enable and disable this whole window. So I'm going to take the reference of that also. So public, let's say game object, and respawn UI. Now I'm also going to convert this class to a singleton so that we can access it in the other classes without taking the reference. So I'm going to simply say public and the name of class, which is game manager, and let's call it instance, and it is going to be null. Now we are going to set it in the awake function. So the first thing should be the instance equals this. Now we are also going to make the float variable. So let's say private float time amount. So this is the time of the respawning. So let's say we are going to spawn the player after 5 seconds, so assign it to 5, and we need another boolean to actually tell us that the countdown has started. So private bool start respawn. And now in the update function, now in here let's first check whether the respawning system is enabled or not, which is this boolean right here. So copy that and put it right there. So if the respawning system is now enabled, so we are going to create another function here called start respawn, and in here we are going to call this function. Now in here what we are going to do is we are going to subtract the value from our spawn time amount. So let's say time amount minus equals and time dot delta time, and the text, we also need to update the text. So where is it? Spawn timer. So spawn timer dot text is going to be the time amount dot toString, and in the format we are going to say f0. So we only want to display the integer values because time dot delta time is 0.02. so let's append it in the start. So let's say respawn in and then colon. Now right here we are also going to check if the time amount is 0, it means the wait is over. So less than or equal to 0, then we are going to disable the respawn UI first of all. So we are going to say respawn UI dot set active, and it is going to be false, and also set the start respawn to false. So this is going to be false. Now actually this start respawn is going to be false by default, so we need a method to enable this whole respawning thing. So I am going to create a new method. So let's say enable respawn, and in here we are simply going to say that the time amount is going to be 5, and also the start respawn is going to be true. So we will call this method whenever the player health reaches 0. So this will enable this whole respawn system, and after some amount of time this is going to be again disabled. Now let's go back to our cowboy class, which is our player, and in our health class. In here we are disabling and enabling these three variables in the death and revive function, but we need to access another thing, which is the player canvas, because when the player is dead, we also want to hide the canvas that player has, such as health bar and player name. So public game object player canvas, and this player canvas is going to be disabled when the player dies. So player canvas dot set active is going to be false, and the opposite of this is going to be in the revive function. Now another important thing that we need to do is, which is in the player script. So right now you can see that in the death we are only setting the some components to false. So we are simply enabling and disabling them, but the player will be in the scene and the inputs will work. So we need to disable the input so that when the player dies, player should not be able to move. So for that we are going to create a boolean. So I am going to say public bool, and let's say allow movement, or actually allow inputs, and it is going to be false. And in here we are going to say not allow inputs. Well, actually change it to disable inputs so it makes sense now. So just change it to disable input. So if disable input is going to be false, now this disable input is going to be called from the health script when our health is 0. So to access this disable input variable, we need a reference of the player class or cowboy class inside our health script. So we are simply going to create a public reference for cowboy, and let's call it player script. Sorry. And this player script is right here when our health is less than or equal to 0. We are going to call the player script dot disable input and set it to true. So now when the player revives, we are going to again set this disable inputs to false. So let's go back to game manager, and in here we are going to let's say a public void and enable inputs. And now to actually access the variable disable inputs of the cowboy, we need a reference to this our player. So let's create a public reference. So public cowboy, and let's say player script. Well, actually this function will be not in the game manager but in the health. So because here we are reviving our player, so we are going to also enable the inputs. So in here we are going to take the reference of our player script. So let's remove the reference that we created here, and instead in here we have this player script. So let's copy, and in here we are going to say disable inputs is going to be false. Now this function will be called from our game manager. So let's go back to game manager and let's get a reference of the local player. So I'm going to say public game object local player, so the local player who is playing on the current machine, and copy this and so then in the start respawn, so after the time has ended, the player should be, the respawning system should be enabled, and also our inputs should be enabled. So we are going to say local player, the variable we just created, dot get component, and the component is going to be health because the script and the function is in the health. So dot get component is going to be the health, and we are going to call enable inputs. Now also we need to call this revive RPC, because right now we are not calling it anywhere. So after the timer time ends, the player should be respawned, and inputs should be enabled, and so the revive function, revive RPC, should be called. So to call this, what we are going to say, we are simply going to say local player dot get component, which is health, and well, actually not health, because we know that to call the RPC we need a reference to the photon view of that component. So because the health is part of player, so we are simply going to say photon view dot RPC, and the string of RPC and the targets is, so the RPC is going to be the revive. Copy that, and RPC target dot all. Now in the function you can see that we are setting the respawn UI to set active to false, because the time has over, but in the enable respawn we are going to again set it to true. So simply true. Now finally we are going to call this enable respawn function from the health. So right here in the check health, if the health is less than or equal to 0, means we are going to call the game manager dot instance. So actually this game manager instance should be static so that we can access it without any reference. So let's go back, and now game manager dot instance dot enable respawn, and the function should be public. So let's make it public so that we can access it in another scripts. And now start respawn. Well, actually it's not starts respawn, because you know that start respawn will be called from the update. Instead we are going to enable the respawn process. So just make that function public and copy this string, and in the health call that function. And one other thing, actually you can see that this local player, we declared it but it's not initialized. So we are going to initialize it from the player script, and in the player script, in the photon view, in the awake, if photon view is mine, we are simply going to set it to the current local player. So game manager dot instance dot local player is going to be this dot game object. So the game object on which this script is applied. Now let's go back to the editor and make sure to save everything, and let's assign our variables. So on the game manager, let's see, we need to assign the respawn UI, which is going to be this respawn UI, and the spawn timer, which is going to be this text, and the local player. Actually we don't want to initialize it because we are setting this local player manager reference right here. So let's actually hide it in the inspector. So hide in inspector, so that way this local player should be now not visible to the inspector. So that's it. And on the player, let's see, so we have everything, and in the health script we need to initialize these values. So for the rigid body, the rigid body is on the player, so just drag the player and it will get the rigid body component. And the for sprite render, this component is on the cowboy, so let's drag the cowboy. And the collider is also on the player canvas is going to be the canvas inside the player, and the player script, which is going to be the player again. Now whenever you make changes on the prefab, make sure to hit the apply button. Now I have built the project, and right now you can see we have 2 instances. So in case you are wondering how I build these 2 instances on the same machine, so the trick is to actually build your game and then copy the same folder and rename it. So I have one build here, PC1, I copied it right here, and run first build from that folder and the second from the second folder. So so now you will have these 2 windows. So let's say this is going to be PC1, and the join is room is going to be ASD, and this is going to be PC2, and the room is going to be ASD. Now right now my internet is very slow, as you can see that the ping is too high. So lower ping means your internet is fast. So let's see, so PC1, and there is PC2. So right now I am controlling the PC2. So let's shoot the player. So the player died, and you can see that our respawning system is working. But the problem is that we are not updating the health when we are reviving our player. So let's shoot the PC2 from here. So you can see that now the player 2 is going to be revived again and again with the same problem. Health bar is not working fine, so we will fix it in the next video.